All right. So a ways back, we decided that we wanted to start talking about individual character classes as part of our show, to possibly maybe once a month introduce a character class in D&D 5e, talk about some of the things we were interested in, talk about how the 2024 Player's Handbook changed. And we decided that the monk was going to be a great place to start for this, because the monk has experienced some amazing changes, and it's a character class that we were kind of interested in exploring. So stay tuned. We're talking about that next. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your weekly Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPG podcast, where every week Rich, Garrett, and I pick up a subject around the culture of gaming and discuss it with you. So without further ado, sharpen up those daggers. We're going to get started right now.
Monks are so back, dude. We are so back.
We're back. We're here today.
That's how we're bringing it in?
You got a problem, dude? I don't see you doing anything.
I listen, I put it on you guys. I like to let you guys bring it in. You do better than I do, frankly, and that's it.
Yeah, we know, and so do the viewers. Now, guys, before we get talking, all right, we're going to do our classic 3-question character build. Todd, where are you from?
Oh my God, you're throwing this right on me right off the bat.
Right on you.
No, like, how you doing? What'd you do this week?
Nope.
Nothing.
We're going right into character build. Where am I from? All right, 3-question character build. Let's do it.
Doing it live.
3-question character build. Where am I from? I am from the darkest depths of the sewers. I lived in the sewers my whole existence because I was pushed down there through an oppressive force. And so that's where I took up my home.
And the second question is, what's an event that happened in your life, like a capstone event?
The second question is, what's a significant event in your life?
Why were you pushed down there?
I mean, I'll leave that to maybe the significant event, or I'll leave that to the next person. I don't want to get too detailed. Remember, 3-sentence backstory is about brevity.
Now, I have a disfiguration on my face that was so off-putting and so scary to the townsfolk that they stuck me in the sewers. Said if I ever came back up, they'd kill me.
I love that.
Wow.
I love that.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
Done. And the third question, Garrett.
Yeah. Third question is
the
what
event
pushed you?
that pushed you into adventuring.
Man, the disfigurement or the deformity, that's throwing me for a hardball here. I think what pushed me to adventure is, down in the sewers, the seedy underbelly of the city. There's a faction, like a rogue faction. And I think the leader of this faction has forced my hand, almost a ransom. They've taken my best friends. Maybe my best friend double crossed them and has taken them ransom. And I need money.
Wow.
And to try and save my friend.
Nice.
So I think I'm going to come up out of the sewers.
Excellent. I
love that because, he's leaving the sewers, not even for himself.
Yeah.
And so it's probably even harder for him.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I can kind of see this character already. All right. So there was 3-sentence backstory. I think this is going to be a regular segment on the show. Let's do this every time.
I'm down.
And I think we're going to develop a whole catalog of these. So let's stay tuned for that, you guys. So what did you do this week? Let's have a like little light intro here. Because I'm excited about PAX, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing a couple of things. Number one, we got some new stickers generated that we're going to give out at PAX, which they're nice. They're vinyl stickers. They're full color. They're die cut. They've got our logo and a D20. They look good.
Yeah,
they look good.
We got swag.
We got some swag.
Woo.
So, and the second thing is I'm kind of trying to buy a cloak.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also trying to buy a cloak. I'm going to go to PAX looking really cool.
Well, cool is very subjective. And of course, within our own small sphere of nerddom, our cool is very different. But I like our cool way better.
Oh, the best cool. Are you kidding me? We can go on adventures in cloaks.
So this week we were supposed to go down to that shop and try on those cloaks at that really cool store. We're not going to out ourselves as to where we live, but near us, about 45 minutes away from us, there's this very cool shop that has a real great selection of cloaks, and we love it. And she got a couple in for me because I told her what I wanted. So she ordered some for me, and I'm like psyched to go down there.
Dude, I can't wait. I'm going to try to go this week or something.
Yeah, Friday we'll go. Anyway.
Yeah.
We're talking about the monk class this week, and I'm excited about that.
I can't wait. As someone who's kind of looking at the monk as something to play in my next adventure or something, it looks so much more fun and playable than it used to.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. And I'm going to be honest with you. The monk was never a class that first of all, as a DM, I've never had a lot of people sit at my table playing a monk. I've had a couple. But number two, as a player, which I rarely am, but as a player, monk never struck me as something to even consider.
Yeah, I really only knew them for like Fury of Blows, and I knew they could do like a lot of attacks on one turn.
Flurry of Blows.
Yeah. That's kind of all I knew them for. But now they seem really versatile and customizable.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Todd. I did try playing a monk. It only went for a couple levels. It was for a very not quite a one shot, but multi-shot short thing. Didn't really get into it, but I wanted to try it out. But seeing these additions to the new player's handbook and the changes that they've made, it makes me like Rich was saying. Rich, you kind of brought on this discussion about the monk because you're interested in it, but seeing the changes, it seems like they got so much better.
Yeah, it does. And like I was researching it, just for curiosity and to play them. And I was just like, I think we should talk about this because it's so like dramatically different.
Well, and the other thing we hope to do on this podcast is we are going to be bringing in classes that you can play on a regular basis. So we'll have an episode a month that points at a particular class, hopefully. I mean, that's the goal. Also, you guys probably know by now, if you're listening, that we also do an accompanying companion video that we put up on our YouTube site. And we're going to do one about the monk. It'll be a little different than the podcast. It'll be more specifically pointed towards people who want to play the monk. But, it'll kind of be a companion piece to this.
Yeah, I would say in forms of the new 2024 Player's Handbook, the monk was probably one of the most changed and altered characters from compared to the standard 5e.
Yeah.
They definitely got their like glow up or whatever you want to call it.
Power level wise, they were picked the least in the 2014 actually under Rangers, who everybody makes fun of. But for the 2024 Player's Handbook, the most improved and changed classes are actually the Warlock, I believe, the Wizard, and the Monk.
Yeah. They're up there.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that stuck out to me was I noticed that key points got changed to focus points, which is so it's a different word, but the system is also inherently different with this.
And not only with those focus points, but they were buffed from the get-go. So not only do you not start with a D4, you start with a D6, but it subsequently is leveled up as you go. So then you move to a D8 and a D10 earlier than you did before.
You're talking about the martial arts die,
not the key points.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, Rich, is the die that you use for your attacks, your unarmed attacks, your weapon attacks, etc. So yeah, they were the original edition. You started at a D4. Seemed very underwhelming, underpowered. Yeah, because most weapons do more damage than that. So it's like, why would I choose to be unarmed, or etc. Where now it starts at a D6.
Yeah. So in terms of your martial arts die, the thing that's interesting about that is in a typical unarmed strike, right? Any typical unarmed strike with any other class, you are basically taking 1 point plus your strength modifier to deal damage. Because the assumption is that class is going to be using a weapon. And if you drop your weapon or, you just happen to be sitting there drinking a beer and you want to punch somebody in the face, it's going to be a 1 plus your strength modifier. But now we bring martial arts into play. And the assumption is that your hands are now the weapon. And we get to take a die that continually goes up through the levels to apply damage with, which I think is, it's always been that way, but it goes up really fast.
Yeah, much faster than before, making it, more viable and making sure that the monk is not a weak link amongst their friends. who are already probably doing like 1d10
Yeah.
at like level 3 or something even worse. You know what I mean?
So this applies to things like improvised weapons. It also applies to weapons themselves.
Mhm.
So if you're a level 20 monk, right? If you're a 20th level monk and you're playing out of the 2014 player's handbook, let's say you pick up a dagger for whatever reason, you throw a dart or a dagger. Well, that's a 1d4 of damage. But if you're a 20th level monk, that becomes a 1d10 in the 2014 player's handbook and a 1d12 in the 2024 player's handbook. That's a very powerful dagger.
I didn't know it was with improvised weapons as well. That's very impressive.
Yeah, it overrides the weapon die. Because if you're using a weapon, I guess the theory is the monk knows how to channel the ability to like override and
is
use
it certain weapons though? Is it martial weapons?
It's only the weapons that they're proficient in. And the monk is very limited on the weapons that they are proficient in. It's just simple weapons and light martial weapons. So you are limited to what you can use, but
that is still sick.
And I mean, in theory, at a higher level monk, with that die, and if you're adding the fury of blows on top, like you're going to be performing what 6, 7 8 attacks in a round, because you have your extra attacks, you have your fury of blows that prevent, you're going to get 3 extra, bonus action attacks on top of it.
Yeah.
All those at say a 1d10, 1d12.
It's nuts.
You're going to be putting out some damage.
So let's look at some of the class features that come with being the monk now in the 2024 player's handbook, because there's some really good stuff that goes on in here, I think. And, we were talking a minute ago before we got into the martial arts die, we talked a minute about the switch from key points to focus points. And so a lot of the class features, obviously allow you to use these focus points to do, new things or similar things to before, but now vastly improved. At level 2, you get Monk's Focus, which is, where the focus points really start to now get called into use. And you can expend the points to enhance or fuel certain monk features. I'm reading this right out of the player's handbook. But you've got 3 basic things at level 2. You got Flurry of Blows, you got Patient Defense, and you've got Step of the Wind, which all 3 of those, I think, are, we're used to these to some degree.
All right. So, I'm going to step in right here. What I love that they changed in the 2024 player's handbook is essentially all those actions that Todd just listed off. They are now inherently the rogue cunning actions. You can use, your patient defense will allow you to disengage as a bonus action without spending one of the focus points. But if you do spend a focus point, you now get to disengage and dodge. Whereas in the old one, you got to just dodge,
right?
As using your bonus action or your key point.
Yeah.
So now you're getting you're doubling up on some of these.
Well, that puts more of the power in the player's hands, right? Because they have the choice. All right, am I going to double dip and spend that focus point to kind of like do more, or do I just need to do the original thing?
Yeah.
And players love to have these choices while they're playing, right?
Yeah, I like the ability to have that choice. Or, if you're out of the focus points, you're still going to be able to do those things that you didn't have the ability to do before.
And it makes sense as a martial class like the monk is, probably the most dexterous martial class. They should be able to do things on the battlefield in hand-to-hand combat that other classes can't, right?
Yeah, no, I agree on that.
Well, and the other thing I kind of want to really focus on in terms of my commentary here, my interest in the monk is, yes, the monk has become more powerful. And this is sort of like what everybody focuses on. Whenever we look at any of the video advice out there on YouTube about what, how to maximize this player, how to maximize this character or this class's output potential, we're always talking about like, all right, which background do you take? Where do you put your ability scores and, proficiencies to absolutely maximize a character's damage? The Bard is a great example when we're talking about which school they utilize in terms of their help me out here. When
their college.
Thank you. College.
Yes.
College. Not, yeah. So, how do you make the Bard the most powerful? So with the monk, it's sort of like we were never really able to do that. And so the Bard gets swept to the side because we can't do that. But hang on a minute. Yes, we've made these improvements. But I also have a side of this argument that is about the poetics of fighting from a descriptive standpoint. And I looked into a lot of where does the notion, when we think of a monk, not in D&D, but we think of a monk just in the world. We think of a very meek, peaceful individual that's associated with a specific religious discipline, and maybe they're, being a monk means they commit their life to a god. They're sequestered. They write in manuscripts. They never marry, et cetera, et cetera. This is not a warrior, but now we've got the warrior monk archetype. And I wanted to know, where did that come from? And so I started looking into some of this, and I'm going to get into this in a little while, but we're going to focus at the beginning of this on the power traits and the focus points and the abilities and features and all of that stuff. But I want to get into the history of this a little bit because I think it plays into role playing really, really well.
Well, for sure. Why do people play monks, right? It's for the power fantasy. It's for that, that punching, that kicking, that kneeing, and, throwing a bunch of strikes all at once. Like, that's why you want to play a monk. Yeah,
no, what Todd was saying, just that warrior type monk archetype. That's what I think of when you think of D&D monk.
Well,
honestly.
So, if you look up, where does the history of, all right, I guess we're getting into this now.
Yeah, why not?
I wanted to research the history of the warrior monk. And the first thing that'll come up if you do a search on this is the Shaolin temple.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Shaolin monk from China championed this. They trained their monks to fight in hand-to-hand combat to defend their temple. Now, if you look out there in the sort of film world, there's two very famous Shaolin-based Kung Fu movies, which is where Shaolin Kung Fu comes from. And they are Kung Fu Hustle and Shaolin Soccer. Now, these, as Kung Fu movies go, are totally absurd. The fight sequences in these movies are just off the chain. And I personally love them, right?
Oh, they're so fun. The one you sent me last night was just, insane, unrealistic, over the top.
It's the one where the landlord couple fights the beast in Kung Fu Hustle.
It's so good.
It's so good. But let's think about what that looks like. And for those of you that are out there listening to this and you don't know what those are, you can just go on YouTube and find that fight sequence alone. The landlords fight the beast from Kung Fu Hustle. And the first thing you're going to notice is that they're absolutely absurd. They're absurd. But why? Why? And it's because those sequences want to emphasize the beauty, the poetics, and especially the aesthetics of Kung Fu fighting, right? There's an aesthetic component to Kung Fu. And so as a monk in D&D 5e, as a monk, I think, like Atticus, for example, in our D&D group, they are the absolute best person at describing how a fight sequence goes down in all of its detail. It's like I take a small amount of a powder, rub it in my hand and begin to sort of, they're really good at kind of fleshing that out, right? If you're a monk in this game, I think the aesthetic should be key.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And even dependent on your subclass, the amount of flavor and description you now have in each of these distinct and well thought out subclasses is incredible. I mean, between the Way of the Elements monk, who's basically the Avatar of the Last Airbender, right? Or the Way of Shadows monk, who's basically Batman.
Yeah. No, I love all these, the role play ability to all these subclasses and just the monk in general. I like the idea of it.
There's so much flavor.
Yes.
Well, here's a physical example, because the whole time I'm reading the class features, right, I'm thinking about Kung Fu Hustle because I just happened to look at that again. And so at 4th level, you gain a class feature called Slow Fall. I'm going to read right from the player's handbook. You can take a reaction when you fall to reduce any damage you take from the fall by an amount equal to 5 times your monk level. Okay, let's do the math on this. When you fall, you take a 1d6 bludgeoning damage per 10 feet of the fall. Okay, so let's say you fall 100 feet. Well, that's 10d6. That's a pretty terrifying fall. And I don't know the average roll on that, but it's probably going to be somewhere around 36 to 40 on an average roll, because I always take the halfway point of the total dice and then just go above the halfway point on that number. So let's say you're between 36 and 40 on that, because your max roll would be 60 points of bludgeoning damage for a 100-foot fall. And if you're level 10, you get to take 50 points of that damage away. So if you're a monk that's a level 10, you could literally jump off of a 100-foot cliff and not take any damage. And to me, I'm going to see that character falling through the air, 3 flips into a poised strike pose, land on the ground, strike the ground with my fist.
Yep.
The ground shatters beneath me. And then I stand up, posed, ready for the next attack, taking no damage from 100 feet.
I just saw that in my mind.
That's incredible.
It's
That's
incredible.
Also terrifying.
Right?
For the enemies, you know?
Right? Oh my God.
Or imagine you land on an enemy.
Yeah.
And you have the charger feat where if you move 10 feet towards an enemy, you can add an extra like D10 damage on it.
Yeah. So see, now we're talking about, these are the aesthetics and the poetics of hand-to-hand combat, AKA Kung Fu.
Mm-hmm.
There's other like media I can think of that make me think of like the monk, right? Whether it's Dragon Ball Z or whether it's like some anime like Jujutsu Kaisen. Like there's just an aesthetic that no other class can fill.
Well, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of history that we can also go to too. Like if you're looking to sort of say, yeah, okay, but the Shaolin thing is not my thing, but I still want to play a monk. What other historical examples can I look at? And so, you know, you've got the Knights Templar, which is a religious order that was all based in fighting, right? They're more paladin-like, but they're still, you know, they're kind of part of that monastic warrior class, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the Sohei, which is Japanese, similar to the Shaolin, but, you know, from a Japanese standpoint. There are the lay brothers. They're part of the Catholic, you know, order, which, you know, in Catholicism, you had to be able to read. So you knew the Bible so that you could sort of have the calling of God. You know, you needed to know how to read, but most people could not read. And so, but you wanted to dedicate your life to God. So what did you do? Well, you became one of the lay brothers. And this is where layperson, I think, comes from a etymological standpoint. But anyway,
I think like this, besides like the whole like historically accurate combatants that we're talking about, you know, like the Knights Templar or something, the monk comes from the story of Wukong. That's where the monk comes from. The monkey god who fights with a staff, a pole staff, and, you know, fights gods with his bare fist.
Right.
That's where it comes from.
Right. Well, yeah. Yes. I think there has always been a defensive, when it comes to monastic beings, there's always something about defending what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I believe fight or combat has to be part of that, to fight for what you believe in. I mean, is that kind of where we're coming from with that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you two, you know, we talked about this whole XYZ thing. And as the Gen X guy in the group, I'm old enough to remember this. And if you guys out there that are listening, you're going to get this point. But in the TV sitcom series MASH, right?
Ah, yes. One of my favorites.
Oh, get the fuck out of here. Okay, so fine. Anyway, but in the TV sitcom series MASH, which is about an army troop order that was in the Korean War, there is a pastor that is part of that regiment. And his name is Father Mulcahy. And Father Mulcahy's like, you know, this meek, wise, loving, caring person who's a beloved character on the show. But his favorite sport was boxing. He loved boxing. And that kind of works. You know, there's like this singular guy, this monastic guy who believes in God, but he loves a fight. He likes violence.
That's incredible.
Boxing is like, you guys were talking about boxing before we started this podcast. And it's just, geez, how does that go together? It makes no sense.
But it's beautiful that you can find that like religion and whatnot and like enlightenment through something as violent as boxing or like UFC or stuff like that.
I disagree. I disagree. And here's why. I'm coming at you, Rich.
Oh, no.
I'm coming at you.
Come at me. See what happens.
Well, because I think that, okay, let's talk about this. You know, you could talk about religious order and righteousness and fighting, and we could have the paladin on one side of that argument, and we could have the monk on the other side of that argument. And I believe the key difference between those two, other than weapons and armor and all that stuff, is personal gain or glory. I believe the righteousness of a paladin is kind of like, you know, he is the hero. But I believe the monk
Does it for the love of the game.
Is the opposite of that. Exactly. It's the meekness comes through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like the Beast in Kung Fu Hustle is like this homeless guy who basically looks like the last person in the world you'd expect to be able to fight you to the death.
Yeah.
He doesn't come in wearing a gleaming suit of armor with a helm and a giant crest of his order. And he basically holds aloft his two-handed sword and says, I will protect you. No, he's kind of laying drunk in the gutter with rags. And if you wrong him, you die.
And I'm gonna say as well that like, oh no, it's leaving me. And I had a really good point as well. It just up and left. It hopped on the train and disappeared.
That's usually my job.
I know. What the fuck, man? I didn't take my B supplement this morning.
I mean, I was going to mention just what Todd was saying, the guy laying in the gutter. I don't know the exact word right now, but in 2014, wasn't one of the subclasses like the way of the drunken monk or something like
Drunken
that?
Master.
Drunken Master.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going for it right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's the drunk guy in the corner of the bar, you know, ready to throw down.
Of course.
You don't expect it.
I figured out what I was going to say.
Okay.
The difference between the paladin and the monk, right? The paladin's doing it for glory and for all that stuff and for their god and everything. The monk is basically an artist, right?
Mhm.
He's in the zone when he's in that kind of fighting technical place, right? And they do it just for the pure passion. So it falls in more like a bard artistic place sometimes, you know? That could be one way to take it.
Yeah. So one of the things you're thinking of, Garrett, was there were 3 in the 2014 handbook. There was the way of the open hand, the way of the shadow, and the way of the 4 elements. And the drunken master does not come into play here. I'm still looking for where that came in.
Yeah,
but
that was an older subclass that's not in it anymore.
Oh, okay.
And that subclass used to be about kind of rolling with your punches, being highly mobile on the battlefield, just moving around unnaturally, like you're kind of like intoxicated.
well, also, let's not forget where that comes from in history, because the way of the drunken master is 100% from Jackie Chan. And, you know, Jackie Chan's comedic kind of brilliantly choreographed kung fu. You know, there is also this kind of, I think being a monk has this kind of real beauty of expectations in it, where you can be approached by a big bad who thinks that you look weak, or you look drunk, or you look unprepared, or you look untrained. And all of a sudden, this brilliant fighter comes out of that. And I love that contrast of expectations in this character. That is where the role play meat for the monk comes from. 100% for me.
I mean, should we get back to some of the abilities?
Yeah, let's go back to the abilities. We're straying off here.
Yeah, no, because what I was going to say, you were kind of moving down the list. I mean, the next thing that you would get at level 5, and it's one of the key things that the monk does, is stunning strike.
Yeah.
Now, in 2024, it was kind of reduced a little bit. You can look at it 2 ways. It was reduced and buffed. You used to be able to just kind of spend a key point or focus point to attempt to stun a target as many times as you wanted in your turn. You're now limited to only 1 time a turn, but there's a saving throw against it. And if they fail the saving throw, the enemy is now, if they fail the saving throw, they're stunned. If they pass the saving throw, their movement is halved for the rest of the round until start of your next turn. And the next attack has advantage on them. So there's a bonus to passing it.
And I just go back to Kung Fu movies on this one, because it's sort of like my hand comes up in this act of the stunning strike and stuns my opponent, where they have that stupefied look on their face. Well, of course, the next attack is going to have advantage on them. Of course, their speed is going to be halved. You know, so I think what that did is it played a little further into the role play theatrics of the mechanical part of the game.
Yeah.
Right.
And not only did it do that, but it also made it like more viable. Let's say you're fighting Strahd, right? And Strahd uses one of his legendary things to automatically pass, right? Well, he's still going to have advantage on his next attack, right? And have his movement decrease. That's, it makes it, do something every time instead of just when it passes. Right.
Yes.
They fail.
So they're buffing it a little bit, but they're taking the ability to attempt to stun lock an enemy, you know, because in previous things, you could just keep spending on every attack. You could spend a key point or a back then it was key point to attempt to stun that enemy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so overpowered.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
a stunned enemy, that's, you know,
And I don't, in D&D, I don't like when you can do the same thing over and over again. That's
Mhm.
why we don't let the
Mhm.
entire party make a perception check.
yeah,
You know what I mean? You'll just go around doing it because that's, you know, it's tiresome.
you're gaming it too much.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And I mean, there is basically a class feature that comes in at every single level. The only ones that are missing are 8, 11, 12, 16, 17, and that's it. Like every other level's got something big.
But a lot of those are when your martial arts die is going to increase.
Right.
Like I believe it's the 11.
The ones that are missing. You mean.
Yeah, most of the ones that are missing, I think, is when your martial arts die increases.
Your martial arts die increases at 11. It
Mhm.
increases at 17. So
Mhm.
these are areas
So, yeah.
where the class features are absent, but the martial arts die
And then
increases.
you also get the feat, you know? You get a feat or
on
ASI.
on 8 and 12.
And do you realize that, you know, you gain unarmored movement as a monk as well. So if you're, you know, basically just clothed, your movement goes up. You get 10 feet of extra movement at level 2. So you're
Mhm.
automatically jumping right up to, you know, probably 40 feet of movement. And you get 30 feet of movement extra when you hit level 18.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
That's
Is that new?
No, they've always had the unarmored movement, because I'm looking at the 2014 list
Okay.
right here. So I think all those movements stayed the same.
That's super nice though.
But I was thinking of that also in terms of how some of the things that increased in other areas can now be extended by that. I guess in my mind, I'm thinking about the theatrics of that monk, and I'm thinking about how I can take these things now and utilize them with all of the other increases and really play this into something that is dramatic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They are designed to be able to move around the battlefield into anywhere they want to be, pretty much.
For sure. And especially now with, I believe, the Way of the Open Hand subclass, you are able to, if you use a focused die, right, to do Fury of Blows, you automatically take the disengage action after that without having to expend another die. So you can play this character that runs out of cover, sprints at an enemy, drive-by punches them, and then just runs past into another cover and just keeps zip, 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 punching this enemy.
And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this sort of this dramatic, aesthetically based kind of fight sequence, which, you know, leads us a little bit into, you know, how do we get away from all the mechanics and get into a little bit more role play? Descriptive combat is role play in my book.
Oh,
Mhm.
for sure. For sure.
So another thing that changed really big in the Player's Handbook of 2024 that, you know, I know has, you know, I'm glad we're not live today because this would invite a whole bunch of comments in the comments section, but, or I should say in the chat, that has changed is the fact that races no longer have ability score improvements, which is why, you know, one of the things we'd normally talk about on a segment like this is, okay, you know, what is the best race to play as a monk to get that buff, to get that, you know, to get that extra dexterity or to get that extra wisdom. And so, you know, we might talk about, you know, what race worked there, but races no longer offer ability score increases. All your ability score increases are based on your backgrounds now.
Which makes sense because, you know, you get that stuff from the way you live your life, not from, you know, genetically how you're born most of the time.
100%. And I actually like the way this works a little bit better in one regard and less in another. So what happens here now is in your origins, in your backgrounds, you know, like let's say we're looking at the charlatan. Well, the ability scores associated with charlatan are dexterity, constitution, and charisma. You have 3 of them, and you get to place points where you want. So you have 2 ability score in, you have 3 total, but you can't put all 3 in one. So you can put 2 in one and 1 in another, or 1 across all 3. That's basically the way it works. So now the goal is to say, all right, I'm going to play a monk. My main abilities are dexterity and wisdom. What backgrounds function well with that? And so I start going through them and I'm looking and I'm like, not the charlatan, you know, not the guard, because they offer one or the other, but not both, because I kind of want both. right? So, at the end of the day, it's sort of like, well, the guide background is pretty good because that has dexterity, constitution, and wisdom. That would be pretty good. What was the other one I was looking at here? The scribe is really good. And there was one more here.
Is it the sailor?
The sailor. Yep. Dexterity and wisdom on the sailor, the scribe, and the wayfarer. So I think it's time we took a break. And when we come back from the break, I want to get a little bit more into backgrounds and how they play in. But let's take that break and we'll be right back. Hey, esteemed listeners. Listen, if you like what we're up to today and you like the content that we produce here at Wither and Bloom Studios and what we talk about on iCast Guidance, today's request is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to subscribe. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to go over to Patreon and support us. Today, I think I'm going to just ask you to share the word. Tell people that we're out there. Tell people that this podcast exists. Tell people that Wither and Bloom Studios are putting together a good thing. I see comments on our channel all the time that we're underrated, and we really want to grow. We want to talk to more people. We love getting into a bigger community, and I feel like you all can help us do that. So do me a favor this week. Tell a friend we're out there. See if you can get someone to listen. It'd be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back from the break, and the biggest problem with the break is we get to talking and we realize, oh my God, we're not back on the show yet. And then we talk about all this great stuff and then we lose it all.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we won't lose it.
We'll put it in.
We'll do our best. So when we went away for the break, we were talking about backgrounds, origins, and how to best sort of align the monk with those. And, the ones obviously I think that align best are the ones that both have, ability score bumps in dexterity and wisdom. So, but a couple really stand out, right? And I was talking earlier about the Wayfarer. And one of the things I love about the Wayfarer is the fact that the Wayfarer's, sort of general description is, you grew up on the streets surrounded by similarly ill-fated cast-offs, a few of them friends and a few of them rivals. It goes on from there. But there are other ones. You get feats with backgrounds, which can also help to really improve your monk character. So, for example, in the Wayfarer, your feat is lucky. And if you go and you look up lucky in terms of the origin feats, lucky basically states that you now have luck points along with your focus points. So the luck points, you have a number of them equal to your proficiency bonus, and you can spend the points on different benefits, including gaining advantage on certain types of rolls, and then also giving disadvantage to people that are attacking you, which is kind of helpful, especially when you're involved in combat.
Wait, so they changed the lucky feat? I have not read much of the 2024 handbook.
Okay.
But they changed it. It's based off of proficiency, the amount that you have.
Yeah.
And can you re-roll any roll like before? Or is it only advantage or disadvantage?
So basically in this case, right, on the origin feat, the luck points are basically spent. Advantage is when you roll a D20 for a D20 test, you can spend a luck point to give yourself advantage on the roll.
Okay.
And then on disadvantage, it says when a creature rolls a D20 for an attack roll against you, you can spend one luck point to impose disadvantage on that roll. The reroll part, you're thinking of the halfling lucky.
Well, yeah, feat. The original lucky feat.
Right. That does not seem to apply here.
Okay.
It's basically the same though. Because it's any roll and you can gain advantage, which is re-rolling.
Yeah, but you could choose if you had a really crappy roll, you could then choose lucky to re-roll. Where this, you have to choose to gain advantage or disadvantage. I think that's before the roll. But the ability to, at a higher level, get 6 of those points, I think that's kind of crazy.
Well, okay. So the other thing, yeah, exactly. Because your proficiency bonus would be high enough to have 6.
Yeah.
So you'd have a lot of power there.
Yeah. That's what made me be like, whoa.
But if we just look at the sailor background for the monk, now all of a sudden the sailor background gets the feat of Tavern Brawler. And Tavern Brawler's got a whole bunch of interesting stuff that you can get from having that in your background. So you get an enhanced unarmed strike, which sounds good on the surface, but ultimately isn't great for the monk because it really is just saying your unarmed strike now deals a die of damage, but you've already beaten that. You do have damage rerolls, in the Tavern Brawler. Whenever you roll a damage die for your unarmed strike, you can re-roll the die if it rolls a 1, and you must take the new roll. Okay, fair enough. This one we mentioned earlier, improvised weaponry, now is on the table as a proficient weapon, a weapon of proficiency. So you can throw a plate or throw a chair, and your martial arts die now comes into play as the damage die. That's freaking awesome.
Love that.
Cool.
Right? And so also push is another benefit of this feat. So when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can deal damage to the target and also push it 5 feet away from you. You can use this benefit only once per turn. All right. That makes the sailor background pretty freaking awesome.
100%. Now, when you push somebody 5 feet away from you, are you still in combat range? Do they get advantage if you move away?
Well, that's going to depend on a number of factors. Like if you're fighting with your hands, no. If you push them 5 feet back, they're outside of melee range.
So, okay, you wouldn't need to disengage after that, which is nice.
Yeah, no, I think it probably counts as a disengage action because you're pushing them away. They probably don't get an attack of opportunity based on that feat, I would guess.
Yeah, but more important than that general sort of let's think about this mechanic and unarmed or attack of opportunity. What if you're standing on the edge of a cliff?
I was just going to say, I want to push a dude off a cliff.
Right. And so you add that push action to that, and they're falling into lava, or they're, maybe comedically falling into the fountain in the town square. There's all kinds of ways in which the push can play, in.
Well, yeah, battlefield manipulation, if you have a druid in your party with like spike growth or whatever, you can push them into it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's the way we need to, or even better, you got a Goliath in your party and you now push that adversary into melee combat range with the Goliath, which the attack of opportunity, should they leave it, is that much more powerful. There's all kinds of ways.
Yeah, battlefield manipulation is very powerful, flat out.
All right. So, the last background that I think is worth talking about here is the scribe, because the scribe I love just as, number one, it's sort of like you spent formative years in a scriptorium, a monastery dedicated to the preservation of knowledge. Okay. That tracks perfectly with who you are. Number one, but the feat that you get is skilled. Now, the skilled feat as an origin feat does not come off as being super exciting at first, but it says you gain proficiency in any combination of 3 skills or tools of your choice, and it is repeatable. You can take this feat more than once. So all of a sudden now, you could have proficiencies all the way down the skill chart, which is going to make your bonuses on all of your checks and saving throws or checks insane.
That is nuts.
Does the new skilled feat, because I remember taking that in one of my older characters, do you get expertise if you already had proficiency in one of those?
That question remains open here.
Okay.
And I wonder about that. As the DM, I would say yes. Yeah. If you double up now, and now all of a sudden, if that's on the table, we're off the chain.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I used that to, I used that one character that I built was just insane with perception. And I used it to gain expertise in perception along with a couple of other things. So I was just wondering if it was the same.
Yeah. I'm digging into the rules here a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just to see. But anyway.
Yeah.
So we were talking about some defensive stuff as well for the monk that I think is really important. What do you guys got on that?
Well, I mean, we missed it when we were talking about some of the abilities. One of the biggest things that the monk has, and they gain it at level 3, is deflect attacks. It used to be called deflect missiles, but what I like that they changed for 2024, you can now deflect melee attacks as well.
Which is badass.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And I think it plays just totally into the concept of a monk, just deflecting that blow coming into you. Not just, trying to catch an arrow. I mean, that's badass too, but.
Yeah. And you can deflect it to anybody around you. So if you're fighting multiple guys within like the same combat range, if they go to attack you, you can deflect it, make them hit his friend or something like that, which is very monk.
You got to spend a point to do that. But I think that plays out really well. I like that.
Yeah. And it only gets stronger as it goes on, right? Because then you get the elemental, you can deflect elemental damage. And then lastly, you can deflect any damage. So could be things like Eldritch Blast or magical attacks, which is super cool.
Well, and I think one of the cool things about this is that in deflect attacks, if we're talking about sort of creative role play and how this works, you can get kind of interesting here because the basic rule is So basically it says when attack roll hits you and its damage includes bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, you can take a reaction to reduce the attack's total damage against you. The reduction equals 1d10 plus your dexterity modifier and your monk level. All right. So imagine if rather than it just being a flip of the forearm to block the polearm strike that's going to hit you and you deflect, imagine catching the polearm in your teeth and spitting it back at them. Or imagine there being some other kind of interesting, like you catch it in the armpit, grab it by the hand, and you can now send some of that damage back at the enemy. Because it says if you reduce the damage to 0, which is highly likely in early level attacks, you can expend 1 focus point to direct some of that attack's force. And if you do so, choose a creature you can see within 5 feet of yourself, if the attack was a melee attack, or if the 60 feet, if it was a ranged attack, and that creature has to succeed on a dexterity saving throw, or they're going to take damage equal to 2 rolls of your martial arts die, plus your dexterity modifier. You could do more damage back to them.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I love that.
So now all of a sudden you've got like this amazing element of deflection to deal damage back. So that's great for the power side of things. But then just in terms of the creative energy of this, it's sort of like, you know, can I go back to Kung Fu Hustle for a second?
No.
Okay, fine. Fuck you guys.
No, I love the visual, just adding the aspect of deflecting a melee attack. But if you're going to deflect it, maybe not just use your arm or something like you were saying before with the polearm or whatever. Maybe trip that dude that's swinging the sword at you to then make him turn and hit his adversary that's next to him.
Yeah. I mean, I think
There's so many ways to play it out.
So many things you could do.
Totally agree. I love those elements of this.
That also could like become a whole fighting style,
Oh yeah.
right? You could dip in fighter, take the defensive fighting style and just be a parry defensive god.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different ways to play this monk.
All right. So we were talking about the potential. The other thing I'm always interested in this, in any kind of character, is how dexterity becomes the true nature of your defensiveness. Dexterity becomes your armor class. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, Garrick, about how we can really get that number high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the monk uses not only dexterity, but they also use their wisdom modifier also in their unarmored defense, correct?
Simultaneously.
Yeah. So kind of like a barbarian with the, strength and constitution, the monk gets to use their dexterity and their wisdom score. And what I find really cool, and, 97% of the time, you're never going to get to level 20. But if you did, the new 24 has a body and mind ability that increases your wisdom and dexterity score by 4 up to 25.
Right.
So if you were maxed out before this at 20, you're now at 24. With the unarmored defense, you're now sitting at an AC of 24 plus any, bracers of defense that you have, protection rings, etc. So you're telling me you're sitting there unarmored with an AC of 24 plus.
Well, and the other thing, and this kind of fills in a gap that I left out and was wrong about earlier, but let's explain how you would get there. Because at level 4, you gain the ability. It's the ability score improvement. And I said earlier that there aren't too many, features that kind of come in, your class abilities that come in at levels 8, 12, and 16. But however, at 4, 8, 12, and 16, you can choose to take an ability score improvement, right? So let's imagine for a minute, you're min-maxing, you bring in your initial dexterity and wisdom scores at 17s or, maybe an 18. And so you're now at 17 and 18 respectively. And those are 4 ability score improvement opportunities there. Plus you're going to be at level 20, gaining that extra 4. You can easily get up to 25 in one of those.
Yeah.
For sure. And even on top of the ability scores, the feats can sometimes increase your ability score as well.
Yeah, some of the feats have ability score increases. I'd like to really go through. It seems like they changed a lot. And this could be a whole nother topic. I haven't gone through much of the 24 to see what they changed in feats and how many of them changed. Or it just seems like some of the ones that you're reading off, they did change. And the ability to gain feats on your background now is kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I like, and I'm just going to say this one more time about the Player's Handbook, the 2024 Player's Handbook, is the way the classes are organized in terms of, it's very similar in some respects, but like when we're looking at class features, now they're done by level, right? So it's basically broken down. It's like, here's what happens at level 1. Here's what happens at level 2. Whereas in the other one, it had the features themselves and what levels you got them. So it was a lot harder to kind of just organize your brain around how these things function. This is so much more, organized to look at.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little more organized. When you put that in front of me, that's the first time I've seen a physical copy. And just looking at it, your eye kind of drew right to it. It was like, at level 2, this, level 3, this. Yeah, I like that.
So, I think it's almost time for us to wrap up on the monk, and we're going to create this accompanying video. I was just looking down here and I was like, oh my God, at level 18, you get superior defense. And at the start of your turn, you can expend 3 focus points to bolster yourself against harm for 1 minute or until you have the incapacitated condition. During that time, you have resistance to all damage except force damage.
Get out of here.
It's essentially doubling your hit points.
You're going to go on like full on attack.
Yeah. What Garrett said is right on the money. It's essentially doubling your hit points because when you have resistance, you half every damage die.
Yeah.
You just doubled your hit points.
Yeah. And at level 18, you have 18 focus dice to your focus points to use. What's 3?
Yeah.
It's like, why not use it all the time?
Exactly. So imagine you're level 18. You have taken all of your ability score increases. Your armor class is hovering near a solid 25. You've doubled your hit points because you've taken the superior defense. It's unbelievable.
That's incredible.
That's why I said, we were talking about it on the break, like a level 20 monk. It'd be so interesting to play.
Can I one up that just a little bit?
Sure.
All right. I propose that we do a one shot of level 20 monks. Everybody has to play a level 20 monk.
The DM would be destroyed.
Well, with the subclasses that we didn't really get into that much, there's so many different things that you could do.
Well, I think we'll talk about subclasses in the video.
Yeah.
Right. So go to YouTube and check us out at Wither Bloom Studios on YouTube. And we're going to have a video up in a couple of days on the monk. And we'll talk about subclass. We will talk more about background. We're going to talk about all of these class abilities and how to kind of fine tune this a little bit. Plus, I think we'll pepper the video with some examples from Kung Fu Hustle, Rich, which I'm going to mention again, and Jackie Chan, and a number of other places. Avatar, we'll get some stuff in there.
Yeah,
all right. So it's good talking to you guys about this.
Yeah. The 2024 Player's Handbook is really exciting. I'm coming around on it, honestly.
Yeah. We have to get the D&D Beyond copy. We have one physical copy in our possession. So if you love us out there and you want to support us, send a copy of the 2024 Player's Handbook to Rich he lives in his car on the side of the road.
Why are you going to dox me like that, man?
Wow.
Don't expose me like that.
You guys, thanks for listening so much. We look forward to bringing this to you every week. Tell a friend about our podcast. Get people listening to us. And we'll see you at PAX in a couple of weeks.
Woo.
All right. We'll catch you all later. Take care of yourselves. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to iCast Guidance. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix, Garrett Brennan, and Rich Froman. We drop this podcast every week, and we are looking forward to having you hang out for more. Don't forget to head on over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube, follow our channel, and definitely comment on what you see there. We will probably read those on this show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to next time.